Hello, everyone, and welcome to part 1 of my Streamerbot tutorial series. Well, it's technically part 2, but we're going back to the start. Streamerbot has updated their entire UI and all sorts of other fun things along the way that we need to go back through. Everything that I taught you in the last video is basically meaningless now. So we're gonna go through and reintroduce ourselves to the UI, what we can do with the UI, things that we can come up with along the way. And this is gonna be a long series. I'm finally getting back into it. I've been waiting for this update to come out ever since it got announced for me to actually continue the series. So I knew if I were to do anything after that first video, it would basically be useless with all the new stuff they're doing. And sure enough, doing my own things on Twitch, yeah, it's kind of been useless, anything I would have taught you. So we're going to go through, we're going to do this together. We're going to learn as we go. I've gotten a little bit of a hands-on experience with a new UI, so I think I'm pretty familiar now to be able to do this series again. So we're going to jump back into it. So I'm going to start off this video by running us through the general UI for Streamerbot. This is version 0.2.1. All right, so much like the first video, we're going to start back off in the viewers tab. Nothing has really changed here. It's all pretty much exactly the same. You still have all of your user information here and all the present and non-present viewers in your chat. These IDs, they're nothing to worry about. They're public. So me showing this here is nothing that you guys can do anything with. It's just your Twitch ID. It's like an index of like what user you are in the Twitch database. That's all it is. Everyone has one. It's just there. This is the user information for the user you have selected. Those will come in handy later. We will use these in the future, but for right now, this is just user information. Nothing really to go off of on the viewers tab. It's just there's your viewers. However, we do now, in the new update for Streamerbot, we now have a chat tab, which is very nice because now you can even execute actions from here, search for users, send any announcements, set your stream titles, everything like that, all here from this chat box, which is very nice. I haven't had a chance to play around with it yet and actually use it, because generally speaking, I just use OBS's built-in chat system, but this might be useful for some of you out there. Definitely recommend checking it out. All right, moving right along to the Actions tab. Now, in the last video, I mentioned that you'll be spending a majority of your time here. And now it's even more so than ever, because right now you can see that you have the actions and sub-actions, but they added a new panel to this page, the Triggers panel. What this does is ultimately replaces your need to flip on over to the Platforms tab. Previously, you'd have to go through this giant maze to figure out how to trigger certain actions. You'd have to leave the Actions tab, go somewhere else, find what you need to trigger that action, and then come back around. No one really liked it. It took me a while to get used to the new method with the triggers section, but I think it's much better. It's ultimately much easier to figure out what you can do in the app, and I think for what it's worth, I think this is a much better way to do this sort of system, and I think this is how other apps do it, so it took a bit for Streamerbot to get caught up with it, but it's so much more intuitive now, and I think for new users, it's going to make the learning curve a lot smoother. So, for example, what we can do is we can create a new action called test. What actions are? These are what you can trigger to do certain things. So like send a chat message, show something on your OBS, all that sort of stuff. So this is like the overarching container of sub actions that can be done. This is like what is pointed to when you want something to be done. This sub actions panel is what you want to be done. So think of the actions as a container of things you want to do, and the sub actions is what you actually want to have happen when you call this to be done. So we can go to sub actions, for example, go to Twitch, go to chat, we can send a message to the channel. So for example, I can go ahead and send a message for test, and then all I have to do, instead of going to the Platforms tab like we did before, we can instead right here call certain triggers to have things happen. So for example, in Twitch, if I want to, I can have it run, say, when a chat message comes through right here. So I can click that. Now this will run every time a message gets sent to the Twitch chat. I can also go ahead and do it off a command. I can create a command. The command is triggered. Then we can go ahead and run this sub action. Well, this action, which we'll call the sub action right here. So it's a lot more intuitive and a lot easier, as you can tell, to figure out what you want to be done. The nice thing is you can also favorite all these triggers too. So for example, if I see myself going around a lot and trying to do commands, if I'm doing a whole bunch of commands, I can just right click and favorite that. And now I can come back into here, and anytime I want to make a new event that's triggered off a command, I can easily come in here and do that instead of having to search all over for it wherever the heck you have to go in this app. So it's a lot easier, it's a lot more intuitive, and I think that people are going to enjoy this a lot more than what they had previously. And this really lends to the fact that Streamerbot is a very powerful tool, and now it's gotten even better. So actions, sub actions, triggers, the whole actions tab, this is going to be where you spend a majority of your time in the app. So what is an action queue? An action queue essentially is a list of actions that will get run eventually. It's a backlog the app keeps track of what action to run next. By default, it'll all run concurrently, which means that it will just run basically immediately. It will start from the first one and just keep going boom, boom, boom until it reaches the end without stop. It'll just go nonstop. In some cases, that is fine. In other cases, that might not be as what we want it to do. Say, for example, we have an action and we want this action to show something in OBS, wait a couple seconds, and then hide that source. If it were to run that all concurrently, that waiting a few seconds is not going to matter, and it's not going to run the way we want it to run. So to show this in action, I created a new queue. I called it test. By default, everyone will have this queue called default, but I created a new one called test. If I hit edit on this, I have this little check mark here for blocking. What blocking will do is it will allow us to wait for the last action in that queue to run before doing the next action. So if I were to go over to the actions tab and hit this for our action, we have the option to assign a queue. All actions will have the default one assigned by default. If I wanted to assign it that test queue that we just created, I can hit test, hit OK, and now it'll be that action will be assigned to that queue. You can assign multiple actions to a queue if you want to, but keep in mind that if you have an action you want to run simultaneously with another action, you have it in the queue, just keep that in mind that if you have it set to blocking, it will run the other action and then wait for it to finish and then run the one you want it to run. So remember that with queues, it will wait for the last action to be done before doing the next one if you have it set to blocking. If you don't have it set to blocking, it'll just run it immediately. And I think that's a very core concept with doing Streamerbot, is understanding how those action queues work, is because it'll allow you to segment what you want to happen and not have it break what you want it to do. And so I have our action right now for test. It's sending a message to the channel, but let's real quick show what these action queues will do by adding we'll say a 2-second delay, which is 2000 milliseconds. You can see how it says right here, the value is in milliseconds. Usually most of these actions, these sub actions, will have a description at the bottom as to what it will do. I'm going to set this to 2000 milliseconds, which is 2 seconds. So we'll send a message, wait 2 seconds, and then we'll send that same exact message back again. Now, I want you to watch this pending actions tab. So if I were to get rid of the queue, set it back to default, right? So this is where it's going to run immediately. If I were to do !test in my Twitch channel and I send it, it blips in and it's gone. It did what it needed to do. It's all gone. If I were to now instead, let's disable this action real quick, this delay, so I can really show what this will end up doing. So if I were to do multiple tests, you'll see it just doesn't even show up in the pending actions. It just goes right into the action history. And what we want to do is if I enable this again, and I think it will probably show whether it's queued or not. So right now it's not queued. It should just run immediately. So if I paste this in a bunch of time, you'll see it's running. You'll see it says state running and it all finishes up at the same time, right? You can do it all over. It's running it. It's sending all those messages. But now, if I assign this action to that test queue we created, and I hit !test in my chat again, you'll see now it has a running state and a waiting state. So it runs the first action, waits for it, and then runs the next one in the queue. And that is what an action queue is. And that's why it's so important to know what these do, because there's a difference between your actions working correctly and just completely breaking the intended behavior. So if you have a really complex action, I highly recommend setting it up to an action queue, and we'll be doing that a lot throughout the series, is playing around with these action queues. So get familiar with them. In most cases, you'll want an action queue. In some cases, like this, where you're sending a Twitch message, probably not. But if it's something that requires a lot of effort, definitely use an action queue. Moving on to commands, you'll see we already have one created, but this is essentially what you would do in something like Nightbot or Stream Elements or whatever the like to create commands that will run an action for Streamerbot to handle. So right now we had !test, which was running a Twitch message sub action. And in most of these bot apps that you have on like Stream Elements or Nightbot, you basically can just send a message. That's pretty much all it does. But the power of Streamerbot is allowing us to instead assign these commands to full-blown actions. And you can just trigger all sorts of things with these, not just little fun chat messages. You can have things show up on screen, all that sorts of stuff. It's very, very powerful. I know that Mixup does it too, so it's, you know, similar case where using a bot like this instead of like Stream Elements really opens the door for you to do all sorts of things. Now, in the older versions of Streamerbot, there used to be a button down here that would allow you to assign an action, but as I showed you before, now all actions get assigned through this triggers panel. So keep that in mind if you are used to using old Streamerbot. It's going to be hard to navigate, but in most cases, all cases, you will be assigning your triggers through here. It is no longer going to be on the thing you create. But let's go back into this command modal that shows up and describe what's happening here. So that command that I ran in my chat, !test, what I am essentially doing is assigning a command. I gave it a name so I can just, it's a friendly name so you know what it is. And I just assigned the trigger to it right over here. That's all I did. But there's other fun things we can do with this. So you can assign it to a group. So say, for example, I want to organize my commands. So for this, let's do chat messages. So if I hit OK on that, you'll see now we have a section for chat messages. If I add another command, I can make this one be test2. And I can have this be, you know, just like fun stuff. And you'll see it organizes all of our stuff in a neat, concise way. But we can configure these to do fun things, and we can also assign it to be only accessible to certain users. So say, for example, we want this to only be available to our moderators. We can go click on our moderators, and now only the mods can use this command. And we can also do it for specific groups. So we'll get into that later. By default, everyone has these groups available to them, but we can create custom groups to assign certain users to them, which opens the door to have all sorts of fun things happen. And we'll go over that later on. You can also set the source for this command. So right now it is only through Twitch messages this command will get run. But if you use YouTube, you can have it run through YouTube. If you get the command sent through a Twitch whisper, you can have it done there. So it'll detect what source this command is coming from. It grabs it from all over the place. It's based off of what you are logged in as, essentially. You can also ignore bot accounts, ignore internal messages, and you can also have a user counter for how many times that command was run, and a normal counter for how many it was just run in general. And you can set whether it's case sensitive or not as well. There's also a cooldown you can set to it, and a user cooldown as well, which I think we're all very familiar with. There's also regex stuff you can do here too, which is fun. So the basic stuff is just, you know, you enter your command, it's all good to go. But if you want to get really crazy, you can have regex, which is essentially, it's called regular expressions. It's a sort of framework that allows you to pull certain phrases out of like paragraphs or sentences or phrases and detects to see if it matches a desired format. And if you want to get real crazy with it, you can go and use regular expressions to do fun things. So say, for example, someone types in chat this long paragraph, but you want to just search to see if that sentence or that paragraph has, like, you know, hello, I'm so and so in there. You can use a regex to do that. You can also do just normal basic stuff, but regex will allow you to pull it out of like a bigger context, essentially. You can also, right here, instead of doing regex, if you just want to detect to see if one word is said anywhere in a sentence, you can do that too. Also, with these permissions right here, by default, the grant type is to allow, but you can also just by default allow everyone and deny just certain people from being able to access these commands. So a lot of flexibility here with the commands panel here. All right, onto the platforms tab. Now, I probably should have started with this, but I'm not gonna lie, I completely forgot about it. This is where you're going to set up your account. This is monumentally important. You're gonna go to platforms, either Twitch or YouTube, whatever you stream on. Go to your accounts and log in. You will not have access to anything if you don't log in. It's pointless to not log in, so log in. You can set up a broadcaster account and you can set up a bot account. You'll see right here for the broadcaster account, you have the pub sub and event sub. What that does is it feeds in all the events from Twitch using that account. The bot account is just specifically for the chat client, so it allows it to detect what phrases are being said in chat and allow it to send messages back to chat. So say, for example, you have an action to send a message, and we can actually go back to here to that Twitch message. You can actually specify if you want the preferred account to be a bot account or a broadcaster account of who is sending that. By default, if you do not set up a bot account, it'll assume the broadcaster is the bot account. So you're not seeing it right now, but all those responses, all those chat messages are getting sent to the channel by my account. I am not gonna lie, it's up to you entirely how you want to handle this. But if you just use the broadcaster account, this opens the door to do some fun things with your emotes, because if you are not subscribed to your channel, you don't have access to your subscriber emotes. But if you're the broadcaster account that is sending messages to the channel, you have access to all of your emotes. And I use that a lot across the board for all my messages, is to like throw in one of my fun little emotes on there. Which, by the way, you can go to twitch.tv/itsvenji or venji.live to check me out. And it's just more useful to just have the broadcaster account, because it opens that door. Because otherwise, if you want the bot account to have access to your emotes, you have to make sure it's subscribed to your channel. There's no way to give out free subs. You'd have to pay for it, which is unfortunate, but that is just the way the world works. Still do stuff like follower emotes are good. Those are still open to be able to use. You can also use better Twitch TV emotes, which might also be better for you. Anyways, it's up to you. But I personally prefer just using the broadcaster account because I have access to my full range of emotes when I'm sending chat messages to the chat. So that's why I have it set up like that. Channel point rewards. These are your list of channel point redeems that you create on Twitch. You will notice here we have some blue, we have some white. Now, here's a very important thing if you want to create channel point rewards that are interactable with Streamerbot. You want to create all of your channel point rewards within Streamerbot, not on Twitch. So I can go in here and right click add, and I can give it a title, I can give it a cost, the prompt, everything. All the options you would see on Twitch aside from assigning an icon are all here. What you can do is you can create your reward here and then go onto Twitch and add a little icon to it. But if you create it on Twitch, you'll see right now, if I double click on one of these, I can edit it. But if I double click on it here, I can't edit this through Streamerbot. Streamerbot did not create it, has no permissions to edit it. So what that means is that I can't do fun things like conditionally enable or disable these rewards through actions. So if you want your channel rewards to be enabled or pausable or disabled through Streamerbot as a sub action, you have to create it through Streamerbot. If that doesn't matter to you, then that's fine. You can just keep them on Twitch, and then you can assign your trigger through the actions tab. That is perfectly acceptable. But if you want to do the fun things like enabling it conditionally, pausing it, and changing the max redemption cost and all that stuff, you can only do that if you have created your redeem through Streamerbot. So keep that in mind, but this is where you can go create all of your channel point rewards and then assign them as triggers over here. If I go to Twitch, channel reward, you can go over here to reward redemption. You can see all of them listed right there. That is the channel point rewards tab. Polls, you can create polls through here. This is very good for if you want to have an action, call a poll to be created on Twitch instead of having to do /poll all the time. Same with predictions. You can do the exact same thing and have it run through Streamerbot. That's nice. Pyramids, this is sort of if you have a huge line of chat messages that form a pyramid. So say the first message is 1 emoji, second message is 2 emojis, third message is 3, and then it goes back down to 2, back down to 1. I have not seen anyone really use this, to be honest with you, but if you find a use for setting up chat pyramids, you can probably Google it and see what it looks like. Probably does a better explanation than I can do, but you can set up chat pyramids, and if you enable this, you can actually set that up to do various things. So I think if you go to Twitch, you go to pyramid, you can set up right here if it was successful or broken. That is totally up to you, but I have never seen anyone really use pyramids nowadays, but that is up to you. If you find a way to implement it, good going. Sub counter. This just gives a running tally of how many people are subscribed to your channel, and you have access to it anytime through these variables. Stream apps, this is where you can hook up your OBS to your WebSocket. So later on in this series, We'll be doing all sorts of fun stuff with showing sources, hiding sources, and all that stuff. Configure that over here. You can get your OBS connected. So if I were to hit add, you can go over here and add up your OBS connection. By default, you have 127.0.0.1 as your localhost. The port will be by default 4444, but obviously copy what is in your WebSocket settings on OBS, and you can choose right here whether you're using 4.9 WebSockets or the 5.x WebSockets that is in the new versions of OBS. With Streamlabs Desktop and Polypop, you can set that all up right here. Then moving on to integrations, this is where you can hook up any other third parties to your Streamerbot. You have Streamlabs, StreamElements, VoiceMod, Donor Drive, Pulsoid, HypeRate, TippyStream, TreatStream, LumiaStream, Streamerbot's website, which allows you to create additional WebSocket clients for stuff like IFTT. There's also VTube Studio, which is very recent addition to Streamerbot that everyone's been clamoring over, which is very awesome. We finally got this. There is crowd control. This is another new recent addition. You can hook up your crowd control and have certain events get triggered when crowd control is run. And Elgato for your Stream Deck. You can hook that up to trigger certain events through your Stream Deck. I have this set up, and it's very nice because you don't have to use hotkeys. You can just hook right up to an action. So you can have an action run whenever you hit a button on your Stream Deck instead of having to do the F keys like F25 or something like that. I definitely recommend if you have a Stream Deck to set this up right here. It'll be very useful for you. MIDI section, this is for if you have a MIDI instrument, if you want to wire up any actions to that. I do not, but you are more than welcome to play around with it. Voice control is very, very interesting, albeit sometimes a little bit wonky. But what it allows you to do is if I hit add here, we can create a new speech to text command. I'll just name it test. And what we can do is anytime, say, for example, I said the word bazinga, I can run a command. If that is found anywhere in my dialogue, it'll detect it from the microphone, and then it will allow you to run an action based on whether you set it or not. You can set up settings here, whether to set your audio input device, the confidence threshold, so how precise it has to be, otherwise it'll get ignored. You can set up the locale where this is being referenced from. So if you're an English speaker, it'll be in NUS. I don't know if there are any additional locale settings at the moment. But make sure that if you do set this up, set this checkbox to auto start listen. That way, when you start Streamerbot next time, it'll set you up to start actually running those events. You can hit start listening right here. It'll start listening to your microphone, and it will grab your stuff. Hotkeys are exactly what you think. You can add hotkeys, and then you can trigger those actions through a triggers panel right here if a hotkey is pressed right there. You can create hotkeys through here as well. And another thing to mention that I don't know if I actually talked about earlier, but all of these panels here, all these tabs, you can actually, most of the time now, through the new UI, you can just create them on the fly right here. This just allows you to come back and manage them and see them in a nice format so you can see what they're all doing. But if you want to see what actions they're assigned to, that's all going to be right over here. Servers and clients, this allows you to create WebSocket servers, HTTP servers, all sorts of other fun stuff to connect to third-party apps and have third-party apps connect up to you. I'm not going to set anything up today for this. We might take a look at this in the future. Settings, this allows you to set up all sorts of other things that is configurable within Streamerbot. You can set up your user interface to show what default comment colors are, what color will be used when a sub action is disabled. You can also revert back to the old queuing system, but I don't know why anyone would do that. This is kind of the experimental tab. So if they have any new or old features they're trying to sunset or they're trying to experiment with, these might show up here. But I think nowadays they just have their beta suite that people can test out with. So this probably is not going to mean much to anyone. Groups tab here. Like I mentioned before, we have the moderators, subscribers, and VIPs. But I can add a new test group here, and I can assign users to that group from the viewers tab here. So I can go to the viewers tab, right click on a user, and I can assign them to those groups. And then what you can do is have it so, for example, on the commands tab, we can assign the test users to that command now. So that's very useful to keep in mind if you want to create group specific actions. File and folder watcher, you can set this up to look at any files that were changed in a folder. This will literally just look to see if anything was changed in a file or folder, which could be useful if you're using text documents to use as a database or something like that. And then you can once again come back over to triggers tab and wire that up to an event. So you can do change, created, deleted, or renamed, and wire that all up here. Really nice. Timed actions. I'll skip over this one first. I'll go back to time actions. Timed actions are essentially what you'd have on something like Nightbot or Stream Elements, where you can go ahead and set up a timer that'll run an action X amount of times in this time span. So I can create a timed action, call it test, and then we can go ahead and set how often. So every minute we can set it to 60 seconds, and we can wait for at least 10 lines to happen in chat. We can also set this to an interval too. So we can set anywhere between 60 to 2 minutes, minute to 2 minutes, to see, you know, it'll change every single time to keep it a little fresh and a little random. We'll set it to a minute, and then we can go to the actions tab. We can go over to here, go over to core, and go to timed actions, and we can choose that timer, and bing, bang, boom, it'll run every minute to send a message to our Twitch chat. And once again, you can create timers on the fly right here in the triggers panel. And then finally, we have the C# compiler and quotes tabs. C# compiler, if you are familiar with coding, you can set up common references here. You can go through your references on your C# .NET directories, and you can have them loaded up into here. This is going to make no sense to a lot of people, but if you do use C# and you do code, this is very useful if you have a bunch of stuff like link or HTTP directories, stuff like that. You can put that all here, so every file will have access to those, so you don't have to find those references. You can just keep coding and not have to worry about the compiler figuring that all out for you. And then quotes, if you want your chat to be able to quote you, you can set that up here, and you can set it up to a command to add quotes. And then there is credits tab here as well, if you would like to record what events come through, so you can put that into a text element on OBS to show a credit screen if that is something you would like to do. But that's if you want a credit screen. You can configure all that here. We will look at that much later. And finally, one more thing I didn't mention earlier that I just now forgot about. How do you see what things are wired up to certain events? There is this question mark right up here that you can click on, and it'll show you a breakdown in a tree view of what is assigned to what, and in parentheses it'll show what trigger is assigned to that action right here. So you'll see we have an action called test. We have it being triggered off of this test command, and it all funnels down into this tree view right over here. Oh, and one last thing I forgot to mention, there is now this modal that pops up if you click this variables button that will show you a breakdown of all of the variables that you have used throughout the app through actions. We are not going to be touching these right now, but these are very useful to see what is being stored in your local data. And you even access to user variables now, which is very, very useful for all sorts of fun things. And we'll definitely go over that in the future. But I just wanted to mention that because it's something I just completely forgot about. But other than that, that is going to do it for today's video. If you liked what you saw, definitely like and subscribe and keep up to date on when I post my next video in this series. I will catch you around, and I hope you all have a wonderful night, my night owls. Peace out.